So, let's start with the organization itself.
Hey, Tom.
We started way back in 1975 as part of the bicentennial, but it was just for 1 year. And we were so successful, we said, why don't we just put together a group and do that? So we applied and got a 501c3 non-profit tax situation. And in 1976, we started giving tours. And 46 years later, we're still giving tours.
Very good, very good.
The beginnings of Lancaster really is the center of town, where that monument is today. That's where the original courthouse was. Now, this area used to be part of Chester County. Now, Chester County's down near Philadelphia, and people kept moving out here, and they said, oh, it's too far to go down to Chester. Why don't we have a new county? So 3 very smart Englishmen buy this land. They know it's going to be a county, and they name it Lancaster after their home in Lancaster, England.
Oh,
and that's how they
sounds
pronounce
like
it,
British.
Lancaster. Yep, very British. And they set up the streets. Now, they actually have a surveyor stand in the middle of that square, and he surveyed exactly 1 mile in all 4 directions. If you don't have your compass, that's north, south, west, and east. So it's all done according to the compass. They had the courthouse built there. They were really smart because they knew people coming here didn't have a lot of money. They could build a house, but they couldn't also own the land, or vice versa. So they used what they use in England, still today it's called leasehold. You actually have to rent the ground, and you buy the house. So you really don't own the ground that your house is on. And they continued to do that until 1850. But now if you buy a house, you get the ground with it. But that was a way of getting them to move here, because they could afford, you know, a couple pounds a year for the lease, and then spend the rest of the money on the house. Now, they set up these streets, of course, named for British royalty. This is King George, Queen Caroline, and you'll see Prince of Wales and the Duke of Marlborough. We'll see those on our trip. And we're very happy that we decided to keep at least King. A lot of cities got rid of it completely and said Main Street or First Street, but we kept that King because of our tradition, that English. And then they started dividing up the town itself. Now, that courthouse was a very interesting courthouse because that's where all of the things were transacted. Of course, all the traffic had to go around to it, and it's physically the center of the city, and it's also the physical center of the whole county. So if you look at the county, it's equidistant from any different position, which is kind of nice, because some county seats aren't necessarily close to everyone. You have to go a distance, but they decide to make it right in the middle so everybody could get here. Well, in addition to that, we know that those men gave land to local churches, and we'll see some of those. Free land for their church, for the minister's house, the parsonage, and for the cemetery. So we'll see that. And they also gave this land to the city, what we're standing on. This is owned by the city. And it's set up in the charter signed by George, I think it was George II, that this must always be a farmer's market. So the farmer's market actually started along that road out on King Street, and they've moved quite a bit until they moved into this building back in the 1880s. Now, the building we start the tour on, that was built in 1790 for the city. It's a city hall, and I'm happy to point out it still is part of the city. They do have offices on the top floors, and they run the visitor center here, so it's kind of nice for us. Very distinctive, what we call the Georgian style. We have the limestone keystone above each window. Windows glass was very expensive, so they had just small panes, so 12/12 is part of that. Belt course running before the first and second floor. Now, we know when they're building this, it would have been just a 2-story building. And as they were building it, they said, wait a minute, we need more room. So they added a 3rd story. And if you move back here, you can see at the top of the 3rd floor windows how they had to make do with the red or rose color limestone. They didn't want to wait for the other to come to get the roof on before
Oh
the
my
winter
God,
came.
yeah.
Now, this was also not only City Hall, but it was the post office. So if you wanted to send any mail or picked up your mail, you had to come here. There were 4 doors, one on each side.
So is it under Benjamin Franklin during those days?
He's still living. No, he died before this.
Oh.
Yeah, he died before this. So then we have the first lending library. We have, when the telegraph was invented, they put a telegraph office up on the top floor. When the telephone was invented, they put a telephone exchange. So you can imagine how busy this was. And as I said, I'm very happy it still is owned by the city and maintained that way. Complained, this is the only one owned by the city. And they complained and finally got this building built. All the other, we had 6 markets at one time. Now all of them are still here, but this is the only one that's a market. Everything else has been changed and they reused that. So they built this, and it's in the Romanesque style. You can see these 2 lovely towers. They were actually designed for ventilation. So when it gets hot out, it's cooler inside because it has fans circulating the air. So, you know, it's not air conditioned, but at least it's cooler than being out in the sun. So they love that idea.
Is there any reason why they only open like today?
Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday.
Yeah, is there any reason
they're
for
working? They're working the other day.
Oh.
The people that are here actually run the farms that they have.
Oh, that's the
So
reason.
they can't take off every day.
That's
Yeah,
why.
one's open, yeah.
So this is like farm to market.
Yeah.
That's exactly. We've been doing it since 1730.
Wow.
It's the oldest market in the whole country.
Wow.
Yeah, 1730.
1730.
Yep. Now we have a plaque here because before this building was built, there was a building here that was owned by a fire company. Now this was a volunteer fire company because up until 1882, we're celebrating our 140th anniversary of the professional firefighting. Everyone who owned property had to be a member of a volunteer fire company. So you're downtown. This is where the wealthy men are living. So we have George Ross, who was a wealthy lawyer, moves to Philadelphia, and is one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence from Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's him.
And his nephew marries a woman named Betsy Ross, who put the flag together. And I like to talk about her because her grandson is pushing her and her name to be the person that actually did the sewing. I don't think she did. She probably had somebody do it for her. But
Yeah,
she
we
was
saw the place where she saw it.
little-
The
little-
little,
Yeah.
yes, the
Yeah.
little place.
They still say she did it, but I don't know. She was married 3 times. Her first marriage was to his nephew, and he dies a year or 2 later.
Oh.
So she marries again, but she keeps the Ross name. She's still Betsy Ross. Her second husband dies. She marries the 3rd time, and she still is known as Betsy Ross because the Ross name is just like a real big name in Philadelphia. Now we also have Robert Fulton. You should know the Fulton Ferry, Fulton Street, Fulton Fish Market in New York. That's Robert Fulton's father.
Even Fulton Street in Long Island.
Fulton Street, yep. So they lived across the street where the Fulton Bank is today. Little Bobby Fulton goes on to be a very successful millionaire in New York City. And we also have our good friend James Buchanan, who was a member of the Masonic Lodge here, goes on to be the 15th President of the United States. Now what's really exciting for us is you can see it was founded in 1742. It's still active today.
Wow.
Now they don't put out fires. They haven't put out fires 140 years since we had professional firefighters, but it's a great idea. The former retired firefighters, retired teachers, lawyers get together every month and figure out ways to raise money to give awards and grants to men and women who want to become professional firefighters, because it's very expensive to do that. So you can call them if you have a fire, but they won't put it out unless you have a financial fire.
And where is their office?
They don't have one. They just meet at different people's homes.
Oh.
Yeah. It's kind of nice though to think that.
Yes, very.
Wow. Yep.
After 9 o'clock, it doesn't start again until 6 in the morning. It's to keep people awake. Now this is the Trinity Lutheran Church, and it's the oldest church building in the city. This
Oh.
is put up for the German Lutherans, and it was originally just a rectangular building. They added the spire, the tower, the steeple about 30 years later, so about 1760, 61. The first door was here at this third window, and the aisle went down the middle, and the altar was on the east wall. And then during the end of the 19th century, everybody's getting large congregations, so they need more room. Well, they couldn't sit everybody, and they said, I don't want the minister to have 3 sermons, 3 different times. So they asked the man who built the courthouse, what should we do? He said, I think you should change the inside of your church. So he said, take that door away and put it underneath the steeple. The aisle goes down the middle of the church. Now the altar's on the north wall, and these windows were put in around that time, starting in 1900. Now the first window was put here at the third, just as a chance. Before that, they had plain glass. They didn't want anything to do with the Catholic Church that had fancy stained glass windows. But then when they realized everybody was having stained glass windows, they did this. And it was from New York City. Joseph Lauber, a German-American artist, did this one of Christ, and then they liked it. They hired him for 40 years.
Wow.
So the last 40 years of his life, he makes all the rest of these. Now the only one he didn't make is the last one on the left, and that's a Louis Comfort Tiffany studio from New York. And it's very expensive, and they probably had somebody in the church saying, well, I want to spend a lot of money and show off, so they said, okay, you do that. Yep. He also did the stained glass windows on the second floor, which is actually a balcony. And these are the prophets of the Old Testament, and on the east side, prophets of the New Testament.
Oh.
We're going to cross our fingers and see if we can get in. Sometimes they clean up and don't have it open. We'll see if we can get inside.
Who's Thomas Wharton?
Thomas Wharton, his grandson started the Wharton Business School down in Philadelphia.
Yes,
And
famous.
that man was named for my elementary school. So I said I went to the Wharton School, not the business school. He was the first, what they call president, like a governor, Pennsylvania. Sadly though, he dies in debt, and he's buried at state expense. He's not even a member of this church, which is very unusual. He's buried there where that bush is, and then they put the marker there. So
Oh,
this
wow.
is actually their graveyard from here in.
Oh.
Yep. Those are 4 statues. We'll talk about them. They're Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Oh. The New Testament.
If you come to about here and then turn around, you can see the lovely tower that was finished.
Oh,
Now
wow.
we know George Washington came through Lancaster at least 4 times.
It's majestic.
The first time he was still in the British Army fighting the French and Indians. The last time he came, he was president of the United States. And it was July 4th.
Oh,
1791. He
so-
took a walking tour. I was busy that day, so some people think I could have been here. But we know he visited this building. Can you imagine? The building was 30 years old by the time he came here. That's how old it was. Now that tower, when that was finished, was the 2nd tallest tower in the whole country. Forget about New York. He didn't put towers yet. This one is number 2. The first one's in Philadelphia. Christ Church Tower. That's taller than this one, but this is the 2nd tallest.
And those are the 4 statues,
Yes,
right?
4
When did
statues
they
there.
take down the original?
And right after World War II, about 1948, they started showing sign of. Now, after they found everybody that was buried here, they had 20 tombstones left over, where the people were already dissolved. Nothing was left. So they had a problem. Are we going to take the tombstones down with everybody else to the cemetery, or leave them here some way? Well, believe it or not, these people still have relatives going to this church 200 years later. So they asked them, what do you want to do? And they all said, leave them here. So the church itself built this beautiful brick wall for them, and you can see how they're recessed in the wall so that when it rains, it doesn't wash off this very fragile stone. They're all in German, very much a German Lutheran
The
church.
original tombstones?
Yes, these are original, right. They used to be across the way, but no one was left when they found them. And so what's really exciting is if you're a member of this church and want to be buried here, you can. You're cremated, and your cremated remains are buried down at the end there, and then your name is put on a little plaque like that.
Oh.
So it's a continuing remembrance for this community. What's really exciting for us is this building was here during the American Revolution. And believe it or not, Lancaster was a safe city. We were far enough away from the fighting that they actually sent prisoners of war here. Now, prisoners of war in those days really had a pretty good life because they got 3 meals a day, they got all the clothing, got a place to sleep, and they got a job where they were paid.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Now those people that attended this church worked at the Steinman hardware store.
Over there.
Yeah, remember that?
Uh-huh.
And they worked in this building grinding snuff, tobacco into snuff for people to chew or inhale with their nose. And they attended this church and they said, what a lovely church here in Lancaster. And about 25% of those men stay in America after the war is over, and they decide to marry and settle here in Lancaster County. Now fast forward to World War II, okay, we're a safe city. Believe it or not, Germans were sent all the way from North Africa to stay here. Now not as many, about 600, and they don't come to this church, but they work at the Steinman hardware store. And they work in this building, which is now making cigars and cigarettes. But they...
This is like the biggest population of Germans before. Like
Oh yes, very much so. And I think that's probably why they sent the German in World War II, because we'd had them before and we were still, you know, we put them to work, right. Now they didn't, the Second World War Germans didn't go to this church because there's a problem. This is English. Everybody's speaking English. Everything's in English. So they go to a church on the other side of the cemetery, which is a German-speaking church. That German-speaking church.
Oh.
Now in the early 19th century, we have a big split over language in Protestant and Catholic churches. English or German. The original Germans who started this church wanted to keep German, so they built a building on the other side of their cemetery. That's how big the cemetery was in those days. Can you imagine? It was huge. And that was still German speaking during World War II. So they welcomed these prisoners of war. They spoke German. They had the German food, the German liturgy, and everything. They felt like they were at home. Now those World War II prisoners of war went back after the war is over. They didn't stay. And they did come back, though, 25 years later and touch base with the people that had taken care of them during the war, which is kind of nice to have that.
Wow.
Now from here you can see across the street on the right, the top of a lovely building. That was originally a brewery. In the 1880s, there were more breweries brewing beer in Lancaster per capita than any other city in the whole country. In fact, 20%, that's 1 out of every 5 bottles, was made here in Lancaster. There's a huge industry. It's 6 huge breweries going, and that was one of them. Sadly, when Prohibition came, most of them closed. We know now they still made beer, even though they were closed. And then after Prohibition was repealed, they never really got back up on their set. People moved out to Wisconsin, and they moved out to St. Louis, and you know, the big beer distributors, Colorado.
Yeah.
This is the only one that didn't get torn down. And the reason was they turned it into a furniture store. So you could buy furniture there, I remember that. And then it was closed for many years because of what we're standing in. This is somebody's backyard. Can you imagine? Grass, a beautiful garage carriage house. And then we decide to cover it all over to have parking spaces. And the city was at that point saying no more. If you want to open anything in that building, you have to show where people are going to park. And there was no place for them to park. So this has been closed for almost 50 years, but it was reopened a few years ago as an event center because that multi-level car garage was built for the convention center. So now people can go there and have their weddings, their parties, all different kinds of things in that.
The museum and garden.
museum and garden.
Okra. Okra.
This is okra.
This is the backyard where Charles Demuth lived. Charles Demuth was a very
Yes.
early 20th century watercolorist. He lived here with his parents. His cousin owned the tobacco store next door, and believe it or not, this was their garden. It doesn't pump anymore, though. Now, during the 1960s and 70s, this was a parking lot. Can you imagine? And we still make a lot of money, so we can see the parking lot back there, but they did restore this. They actually bought his house, took up the macadam, and these are the original bricks from his backyard. So we have a lot of good pictures from that. Volunteers work on all these bushes. The rose bushes were actually given away when they turned this into a parking lot, and they brought them back. So some of them are over 100 years old. They're just really fabulous. And I like to bring groups here because something's always blooming, no matter what time of the year.
Like this one, tulip.
Yes. Tulips.
So nice. They revived it.
I know. Like the one in Northport. My God. They want to tear that mansion down.
What we noticed here.
There's a lot of alleyways.
Yeah,
Little alley.
Hello?
I like them.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Oh, this is the tobacco shop.
Now this is the front of the tobacco store. Charles Demuth's cousin owned it, but his father worked here, Ferdinand. That's a picture of his father there with a big mustache. And this is little Charlie sitting in a chair before he became an artist. And this used to be open as a tobacco store. It was the oldest tobacco store in the country. And we always say, well, George Washington would have stopped here to get some snuff. And we know James Buchanan bought his cigars here, President Buchanan. But you can see the long line of lists of the Demuth family members. The last owner was the widow of Christopher, and she continued running this until she was 85.
Oh.
And then she retired. Well, her children didn't want to run it. They were 65, you know. So she sold it to the art museum. Now the top floor of this building has a ballroom. Isn't that nice? I've been to it. I think six couples can dance. It's pretty small. But she was an avid golfer, and she would practice her putting up there in the ballroom. Now, after the American Revolution was over, the people who were selling us things from Philadelphia started complaining. The road, which is this road, was just dirt, and it was muddy, and it was dusty. And they said, if you don't fix that road, we're not going to bring anything to Lancaster. We'll take it to Baltimore.
Oh.
Well, we didn't want that. We didn't want that. So Christopher Demuth, the tobacconist, John Frederick Steinman, and other people got together and they had a lottery, bought a ticket, and that paid the money to make the first turnpike in Pennsylvania, in the whole country. Right here.
It's made of
Lancaster.
cobblestone or?
No, it's actually gravel underneath,
Gravel.
and then they had the macadam on top,
Oh.
which was developed by a Scottish man named Macadam.
Macadam.
Believe it or not. And
Yeah,
so
Macadam Road.
if you go across and continue on this, you'll end up in Philadelphia. But there are
Oh.
like 100 traffic lights, so I don't recommend it. You know, the turnpike's faster. But if it wouldn't have been for that, we wouldn't have survived as it flourished as a town wall.
Because of the
So they were very
commerce.
good. They actually paid for it the first year in tolls. So after that, it was money making. Yeah, they did that till around 1950, believe it or not. They were still taking tolls in 1950.
So in Philadelphia, it's still King Street? All the way
Well, it's actually called Lancaster Highway,
Oh.
Lancaster Avenue. Yeah. Across the street is a lovely building that was built for one woman, one very wealthy woman. Her name was Catherine Long. Now, Catherine Long's father, Judge Henry Long, was president of the court across the street. He also was a wealthy businessman, and they had a beautiful two-story red brick building here, and that's where Catherine was born. Sadly, I'll wait for the sirens. They're going to come through. They love to blow the horns. You probably didn't hear it. Sadly, Catherine's mother dies giving birth to her, so she's raised by her father in that beautiful building, and then when he dies, she decides to spend all his money. Well, her friends are very nice friends in New York City who build big chateaux on Fifth Avenue. The Rockefellers, the Astors, the Vanderbilts. So she wants to build a chateau here. So she does. She lives here the last years of her life, and then it was owned by different people, but it's now owned by the Hamilton Club. Now, no relation to Alexander Hamilton. This is Andrew Hamilton, who was one of the owners of the city itself. So they name it in his honor. It's like a business club. I mean, you have to be very wealthy to join it and maintain it. But it has 2 lanes of bowling in the basement.
Oh, really?
Yep.
This
it
one?
has several bars and restaurants. It has a squash court, a handball court, and a fitness room. So it's almost like a country club without golf. No swimming pool either.
Wow.
But
For men?
no, it's allowing for women now, luckily. For the longest time they didn't, then they got smart. They said, hey, wait a minute, we have a doctor who's a woman, we have a lawyer, they've got money, so they can join now as full members.
And it's only open the weekend or?
Well, it's just open for members, and then I don't think, unless something special's happening on Sundays there, like a Sunday lunch or something,
Because this
it's
one,
open.
see?
Now they've added
At
to
the
it
back.
twice.
Yeah.
Back in the 1960s, they added this first floor addition. It was a flat roof. It looked almost like battlements at a castle. And then about 15 years ago, they added the top part, which is a new dining room, named for the Steinman brothers. So that's the Steinman dining room.
So who owns the building?
Well, they have a board of directors, members themselves, yep.
The members are all from Lancaster?
They have to be within certain miles of the city. They can't live, say, in New Jersey.
Philadelphia,
Yeah, no, Philadelphia's too far.
Where do they park? They have a parking there?
No, they don't have a parking lot. If you have a membership here, you don't worry about paying to go parking. You really don't.
You to have a driver.
And
Probably.
usually things are after they take after 6 o'clock. It's free to park. Yeah. So you can see they added a new fitness center over here on the left, and I'm told that you can join that. It's not as expensive as joining the whole thing, but they probably come in and try to talk you into joining as a full member. But I always like the fact that they have all the treadmills and the step masters facing the cemetery. So they have to work really hard. But the other choice is a wall. I don't think I'd want to stare at the wall.
That's a good idea, right? Be careful.
But you can see the beautiful dining room that they have in there. Now that could be divided up into smaller dining rooms. It's all one big room.
You ended up there. You don't like to end up there, you have to work it out.
Oh, you have to work out. You don't want to like that. Oh, yeah.
Now this was the original carriage house for Catherine Long, and you can see how they have the same material. They actually went back to the same quarry. If you don't have the same quarry stone, it's going to look different. They actually did that. So now that's connected to the building. It's actually now all the kitchen facilities. Handicapped access is here at this door. They have a new elevator for that. They have a huge new women's dressing room and everything. It's really fabulous. Now to the left of that is First Presbyterian Church. This is where Robert Fulton and his family attended church, and it was attended by President James Buchanan. He was a Presbyterian and attended this, but as he was starting out in his political career, he hadn't joined this church yet. And he said, well, if I join it, it'll look I'm doing it for political reasons. So he said, I'm going to wait, not knowing that he would run for president when he was 65 years old. So he didn't join this church until he was 71. Can you imagine? But he gave money to it. He attended it. So in all intents and purposes, he was a member here. Now what's really exciting is during the 1920s, this is a very wealthy congregation, they commissioned 9 Tiffany windows. You
I
can
can
see
see
5
Oh, this
here,
one?
5 here, and then there are 4 on the other side. And the bottom of those windows is the floor of the sanctuary. You go up steps to get to the sanctuary. So that's from the floor to the ceiling. And the first 2 going down are the Watt and Shand windows for the Watt and Shand
Did
department
James
store.
Buchanan die for president?
No.
So he was 69 when he
And then
had
they're finally
Probably more than that.
doing the brick. For some reason they wanted to paint it. All these years they would have to hire people to go up there and paint it. You can see now they're redoing the brick and have it original. This broke, that's sad.
Aw.
I have to get another one. Put it there. This is St. James Episcopal Churchyard. This used to be the Anglican Church of England, okay, before the American Revolution. So this is the center of English culture and society. And sadly, they closed the church during the war because they were afraid it was going to be burned down. It was not this church, it was a wooden one that was here before. And then, after the war is over, it became the Episcopal Church of America. Now, there are a lot of stories of different people buried here. We try to point out the family that's buried here. Now, these rectangular boxes are tombstones. They're buried 6 feet under. This is how the wealth is showed off. They have these boxes made. So this guy's buried, you know, they just have tombstones. This is the Coleman family. Now, Robert Coleman comes from Ireland. He's one of these rags to riches stories. He gets a job in a Pennsylvania iron foundry, falls in love with the daughter of the owner, hint, hint, and when the father dies, he takes over the iron foundry and starts buying iron foundries all across Pennsylvania. So he's making a lot of money because we need iron for the Revolutionary War.
Train tracks,
His
yes,
wife is
bridges.
next to him, the second one, Anne, and she will have 14 children.
Wow.
Yeah. And the 7 that never married are buried here next to them.
Oh, really?
The third one is an interesting one. That's Anne Caroline, named for the mother. She fell in love with her father's lawyer, whose name was James Buchanan.
Oh.
Now the father has a lot of money. And you know, when wealthy women get married, they get gifts from their father. But who controls that money? The husband. And he didn't think James Buchanan would amount to anything. He's just an upstart lawyer from western Pennsylvania, but they allow to get engaged. So he was engaged to marry Anne. Well, unfortunately, when he gets engaged, he realizes, I better work a lot because people will think I'm marrying her for the father's money. But that, unfortunately, means he has to leave Lancaster to go to Philadelphia, to New York, to Baltimore, Annapolis, whatever. We know that he wrote to her every day that he was gone. We also know that her father took the letters and burned them and told her he never wrote.
Oh.
And her best friends here in Lancaster were envious, and they said, well, look at that. He's going to Philadelphia. That's okay.
Oh, that's okay.
He's going to Philadelphia. He must have a girlfriend there, which wasn't true, but they made this all up, and she believes it all. And so when he returns, she refuses to see him
Oh.
and says, I don't want to marry you, all this gossip. She breaks off the engagement. The parents are consoling because they say, oh, that's fine. Well, now it's December, and the parents decide to send her to Philadelphia, where an older sister is married quite well, and her sister goes with her. She's number 5 here. That's Sarah. Sarah's 6 years younger. So they go to Philadelphia by the stagecoach, which means 6 o'clock in the morning, in December, in the cold and rain. They sit in that
8 p.m.
8 o'clock at night. They're drenched. They probably have pneumonia. And we know that poor Anne is still concerned about all these things. And unfortunately, her doctor gives her laudanum, which is a white powder made of opium.